Welcome to the Be Dadly podcast, where we discuss all things dadly, from being an entrepreneur while caring for toddlers to raising screenagers and talking the birds and the bees. We're here to help you traverse the vast and dynamic landscape of fatherhood. Enjoy practical advice, lots of puns, and even a few heart-touching moments.
And the dad jokes are pretty good too.
And now your host, Brandon Jones.
All right, what is up, friends? Welcome to this very first episode of Be Dadly. We are so excited to have you here. In this premiere episode, we're going to be doing something a little different. We're actually going to be giving you a teaser of the upcoming season. Please have a listen and let us know what you think about this format. And also be sure to follow Be Dadly to hear entertaining stories, helpful insights, and effective strategies that are going to help you up your game as a father, a partner, and an entrepreneur. All right, you guys, without further ado, enjoy.
Here it comes.
Today I have Jayvon Eichner, really awesome dude. I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Help us get to know you a little bit.
Born and raised in New Jersey. I was there for 22 years. And at that point, I moved to Florida for a year to work for Club Med. I don't know if you're familiar with
what part of Florida?
The resort. It was Port St. Lucie.
Port St. Lucie,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I grew up
out of all
Florida,
the places they have Club Med, they sent me to Port St. Lucie, which was a little bit of a disappointment, but I had some fun there. And so I spent a year working on a resort, and then that I had to make a decision. They wanted to send me to Thailand. I was like, all right, well, if I go to Thailand, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. And so at that point, I figured it's not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I went back to the drawing board, and I had a friend in Austin, and she was like, hey, come on down here. You know, I think you love it down here. I came down, fell in love with it. I went back really quick to get my things settled. I went back to the East Coast to get settled. Came back to Austin and been here ever since. Since I've been in Austin, I opened up a CrossFit gym. So I owned the gym called Westlake CrossFit for 13 years. And just recently shut that down 4 years ago to get into the coaching space. So at the moment, I work with men, helping them become role models for themselves and families. Yeah.
And what was it like for you? Like, you paint a picture for us, like previous to being a dad, and then like, you know, now you're a dad. What was that transition like?
My wife and I took on a lot at that particular time. You know, like I mentioned, I was closing down a business, starting a new one. That's right around the time where our son was born. And then also I was dealing with a mom who had a severe case of cancer. And so there was just a lot of changes in my world at that particular time. But prior to Maxwell, it seemed like there was just an abundance amount of time to get things done. We had a lot of time to go on dates, watch movies at night, and our attention was on each other. And for me, it was like, you know, building this business that I was really excited to build. And then once Maxwell came, the attention just shifted to him. We wanted to give him as much attention and love and as care as he needed as being an infant. You know, a lot of our time and energy went towards showing him our love. And, you know, as a result of that, my wife and I didn't have the opportunity, or we knew we could create it somehow. It just wasn't there because our energy and time just got sucked right to Maxwell. I also realized that the amount of time that I felt casually to put into my business, that wasn't there. It was going to mean that I was going to need to be a lot more intentional about my time, you know, what I gave my energy towards.
Speaking of that, for example, and I talk about this a lot too, is that we have to be so much more deliberate with what we do with our time when we have kids, because if you're going to get any you time, if you're going to get time for your business, if you're really going to give them the kind of attention they need, it just has to be really intentional. I'm curious, like, how do you balance your time? Do you have like a specific time you cut off work? Do you have a routine that you follow, or is it still pretty loose, but you're just more intentional with how you set up your week?
The first realization that I had that was really helpful was that, hey, I have enough time. I have time in my day. My wife's very good at writing down what she needs to get done for the next day. So I started to do that and implement that. Just helped me become a bit more intentional with what I was doing, when I was doing. And when I started to do that, I realized, all right, I have enough time. That means that maybe my day was going to be a little longer. You know, I was going to have to put in some work after 6 o'clock, where typically that's where my day ended. But the time was there. And then I was going to have to get really clear on my priorities. You know, what did I really truly want to dedicate my time and energy towards? And so once I did those two things, it just smoothing out the process with not feeling so sporadic and just chaotic. It's like, okay, this can happen. Here's what it's going to mean, and I can get this done.
And like so much of it is like being ready to say no to certain things, right?
That's so true.
We think that if we want to change our life, we want to make things better, we need to add something to it. If I just add meditation, if I just walk, maybe I need to read more books. Maybe I need to join a program. Maybe I need to add in a workout routine. Maybe I need to add this supplement. Maybe if I take this, add. But we don't always give enough attention to what we need to stop.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's way more powerful when we stop doing something because it gives us results faster, but also we recoup those resources. Whatever time, energy, or money we're spending, also we get that back, we can reinvest that.
The first step of my coaching program, we call it clearing the land.
Oh,
it's
cool.
just, glossing over our life and taking a look at these things that really aren't serving us, that's maybe depleting of energy, and they're more drains than they are things that actually fill our tanks and containers. So, yeah, it's interesting that you say that. That is very true.
Yeah, clearing the land. Yeah, tell me about some of your coaching. Are there common themes that you see come up with these dads or that you're working on, or is everybody really a unique case and a blend of both?
Yeah, there is a blend of both. If I had to say what was the common thread, I would just say that, the men that I work with have never really taken the time to really get clear on their values and their priorities and create a vision for what it is that they want their life to look like. I think there's so many ways to be distracted in the world, and everyone seems to be vying for your attention.
Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation I just had with another guest where we were talking about, prior to being a dad, life is so hedonistic. Just pleasure, all hypersensory, like what can I see? What can I feel? What can I smell? What can I go do? What can I taste? All these things, and you're just running around chasing all these senses. And then you get to be a dad, and of course you're hit with like one of the greatest challenges of your life. But then simultaneously, it comes in this like all this virtue and values and legacy, and suddenly your whole world, what you're focused on, is very, very different. It's like, whoa, how do I want to impact this little person's life?
Yeah.
What kind of future do I want to leave? You start even thinking about the world in a different way. You start to see people, you see a person recklessly driving where that may have been you before, doing, and you're like, whoa, hey, bud, you need to slow down, because you start thinking differently and feeling differently. So I love that you start with values. That's a really beautiful thing. And what would you say are some of your values, for example, when it comes to being a father and, just being an awesome dad?
Spirituality, health. Personally, fatherhood is a value of mine. And then intuition, allowing that intuitive guidance to have a say-so in how I show up in the world.
Dive in for me a little bit on the fatherhood value.
Yeah, it's just prioritizing the work that I feel needs to be done personally so that I can show up as the most loving, most compassionate, most understanding father figure to my child. From my experience, it doesn't just happen without the work, without the intention to do the work that I need on myself to learn about my behavior patterns, to learn about my triggers, to learn about things that have been running in my family that aren't of service for me showing up in the way that I want to have my son experience. And so that's just a personal development.
I love that, man. And actually, for me too, is the work of becoming the father I want to be is honestly, even while I'm doing this today, there's been so much work. It's asked so much of me. I had generational trauma that I've had to work through, anger issues, all kinds of relationship conflict, substance abuse, all kinds of issues I was having to work through. It's like, hey, I want to be this person. It's vastly different than who I am right now. I've got this little person in the world that's like looking at me, and I don't want him to look and say, this is my model of, a man, what a man is. So it really did call a lot of work from me. And I'm curious, like some of the work that you've done, what are some of those things that surfaced for you that you had to work through?
The thing that's coming up for me now is the tendency to be a people pleaser, to avoid conflict for the sake of just maintaining, quote unquote harmony. And I saw that coming up with my parenting, where it would be like, instead of just saying no to my child, I would try and, fluff up the no, or, instead of like just saying no, I would try and divert his attention somewhere else so we wouldn't have that conflict. I realized that that's not what I want my son to experience. I want him to know that, hey, there are some boundaries here. I get to share what I feel those boundaries are, and they're there to help keep you safe. They're there to help you stay in between the lines the best that I see fit, at the same time allowing you to make your own mistakes and figure your own way out in the world.
It goes back to that strengthening the no, like being ready and willing to say no, like being ready to say no to the things in your life that are outside those those particular boundaries that are robbing you of that time. And also then being willing to also say no when, this cute little human being wants things or wants to do things that you really do have to draw a line on. And so part of this experience for you has been strengthening that ability to draw those lines.
Yeah, that's well said.
Okay, up next, I've got John Prophet. Now, John is a musician, a video producer, a visionary. He's this epic creative who's traveled the world, and he carries with him a bunch of really cool and epic stories and a lot of wisdom. He has an awesome kid named Miles. I just love this kid. Honestly, just a really cool, bright spirit in the world. And recently, John has become like a dear brother and an instrumental part of building Be Dadly. John's actually producing the Be Dadly podcast, and he's just an epic guy with a really amazing background. And I hope you enjoy him as much as I do. I think of you as like one of the coolest dad archetypes. And I remember telling Miles, you got a really cool dad.
I try to be the dad that I wished I would have had.
I think you might be doing that.
And I think, but I'm also just this eclectic mess of curiosity and interest. And so I guess I wish I had a father figure who would have helped nurture that. I was super intentional about bringing Miles into the world. I was living in Mexico at the time, and I had just been on this whirlwind tour, living in Australia, living in like 3 or 4 different states. Like I'd just been moving around a lot, very nomadic. I was living in Missoula, then I moved down to Mexico, and I was just on this thing of knocking off a lot of bucket list things. I'd done the skydiving, which my father had always talked about but never did, and so I was like, I do it twice, and then, going to New Zealand, hiking over these mountains, in Thailand, doing these yoga teacher trainings, in India, doing yoga teacher trainings, like traveling on bamboo rafts and riding on elephants and tiger preserves and just like all this crazy shit, and diving with sharks. I think that might have been the thing. Like I think I had just done a scuba dive with sharks in Playa del Carmen on the coast there. So I was sitting there after this great experience, this bucket list experience of scuba diving with these beautiful animals. Like, what am I doing? Like, how much more can I just entertain myself? Like, how many more of these little hits, dopamine hits can I get? I'm just like, it just felt empty. And I was kind of like, what's my next deal, God? What am I doing? And it was like, you're going to have a son. I guess that's the next thing, I'm going to have a son. I'm going to be a dad. That's the next adventure. And it has totally been the next adventure. And it's so confrontational as somebody who is like a shark in that I feel like I need movement. And I've learned fairly recently that a lot of that is trauma induced. Like that search for the hit, to need to feel on the edge of things all the time. Yeah. Like if things seem very domestic and planned out and predictable, it's just like I want to just hang myself. Like
it's over. My life's over.
My life's over.
Sitting at home. The TV's on.
It's a challenge too, because it's not that I want to dodge any of the father stuff. It's that I want to just take the dude and run. Take the dude out on to the great adventures. And do all that. And I'm not really in the position to do that because his mother isn't the same way. She's not wired that way. And so I am having to find ways to transmute that energy, that is that wanting to flee energy, that wanting to be on the move energy, and what's the next adventure? And so the beauty of that is that I feel like I put that into him, not in the unhealthy way, hopefully, but in that sense of like, life is an adventure. Like, this is the new adventure. This is what adventure are we going to go on, and really kind of pushing that angle of not feeling like the world you exist in is the world. It is a world. And the world is at large is just this extraordinary, rich tapestry that you can explore and you can take many angles at, and you can learn so much from. So it's like this giant school, really, but it's also a giant playground, and it's also a giant battlefield. Like, it all depends on your perspective, right? And so I think one of the things that I try and really inculcate in him is this broad awareness, the ability to step back and really look at things from a much broader perspective. So even if it's like putting him, sitting down with these different books, and showing pictures of of like African Kalahari Bushmen or these different animals, or, videos of these deep sea creatures, or just this whole awareness of like, these things are all out there happening right now, right as we're sitting in this room reading this story. Mm-hmm. In another part of the world, these things are happening, and you can access that. If you're going to have a kid, be conscientious about it as much as possible, right? Wait until you're really ready and willing, and that doesn't always happen. But also, when you do have the kid, like, you've got to make the time in the relationship for your relationship. Like, you have got to put, like, we did the thing of co-sleeping because we thought, of course, we tried to crib train for like a second. It was a disaster, and we were like, fuck that. Not traumatizing our kid with this nonsense. And then, but the co-sleeping has this kid between you two. And it's like, if you don't carve out the time to like not have that kid between you.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't have the supportive family. Like, they were all over the place. So we didn't have someone to just pawn him off on. We had a great nanny actually for a while, but we just didn't take full advantage of that for ourselves because neither of us had really good reference points for a relationship. And that's the other thing to take away is, if you don't have good reference points for healthy relationships, fucking get them. Like, don't pretend you're going to go into this relationship, you're going to meet this person, it's all going to be magical and naturally going to work out and blah, blah, blah. No, it's not going to work out. Like, you've got to learn relationship skills. You've got to learn how to be that intimate with somebody and that raw and that open, and learn to trust yourself enough to know that you're making a good decision by bringing this other person into your world. It's like people who say, I have trust issues. It's like, well, you don't trust yourself. You haven't developed enough trust with yourself. So of course you're going to have trust issues. And then when you bring someone in, of course they're going to do all kinds of things that have betrayed your trust because you don't know enough about yourself to trust yourself and your decision making. Almost every relationship I've ever had is just like, I have a positive attitude about it, even though it didn't work out. I'm like, it's an opportunity for learning. Like, every one of them has leveled me up. They've been my teachers, whether wittingly or unwittingly. Mm-hmm. I've taken what I could, and integrated it as I could. And then when it didn't work, it didn't work. And I tried to, as best I could, in most of the situations, like, find the gold. Sift for the gold, and then like let the rest go. There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, don't try and force the river. For me, the through line is this, like, we can do this better, and there's a lot of this to be attended to. You have to get to the root. This is the tree that we have allowed to blossom because of the seeds we have planted. This is the fruit that we are getting, right? Mm-hmm. What other fruit do we actually want? That requires planting a different seed. What does that seed look like? That means from the ground up, creating a container for humans to develop in that is different fundamentally than the container we have all grown up in. Right? And that's a big ask.
Yeah,
but like, for me, it's like that I realize is the through line.
It's like a worthy pursuit. It's like
for all of it.
Give it a new container.
For all of it.
For it to grow.
Yeah. It's like, because what could we do with a bunch of healthy, this is why we try to raise our children like we are standing on the shoulders of giants, right? It's like, I want to raise my kid so that he has the minimal amount of therapy bills that he has to right. attend to, like that he is like healthy and whole and self-referential and humble and in service and in love. And I know that's a lot, and I'm not trying to put that on him, but it's like, I want to create the container that facilitates that so that when he goes out into the world, he can just get after it, whatever the it is for him. He can just get after it and not have to unravel all of this trauma that has been introduced through his life. Minimize that. Life is traumatic enough without unconscious people adding to it.
All right, in this next bit, we have Will Carr. Will is the founder of Genesee Protein Bars. He has been through the challenge of raising a toddler while building a business. This guy is doing it, has done it, and is successful at it, which is really awesome. He's got a super big heart and a really cool story regarding blended families. In fact, he has a really rare birth story himself. And I don't want to spoil it, but I think you'll really enjoy getting to know Will and getting to hear his background. Enjoy. Awesome. All right. We got Will Carr here. William, thank you so much for being with us today, brother. So real quick, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
I grew up in Illinois. I had about as wholesome of a upbringing as you could imagine. I grew up on a farm, like 2-3 hours from a shopping mall. And so basically everyone in my family farmed, it's corn, soybeans, wheat. My mom was a school teacher. So, It was dinner every night, family dinners every night, going to church on Sundays. I had I don't want to say sheltered, but I had a really awesome upbringing. I had a great family. My parents were amazing.
What was it like with you and your dad?
No, my dad is super calm. I don't know that I've ever seen my dad really off kilter at all. Totally relaxed. My dad was just a super stable, solid rock. Mom was very much more emotional and expressive. I have an older brother, 7 years older than me, disabled in lots of ways, mostly blind,
Wow.
Mentally disabled. Can't really you can't have a normal conversation with him. He has things he wants me to repeat, or songs he wants me to sing, or little ditties and phrases that he wants me to say over and over and over and over. He can't tell you that 2 + 2 = 4, but at the same time, he knows every song ever written and who sang it. So he's really smart in his own ways. My parents, particularly my mom, they've been his caregiver. He still lives at home with my parents. And so even growing up, my parents were much more tied down, to the house, having to take care of him. It was not that they couldn't go out, but it was so much more work for them to go out and take him out and have him out in public that, particularly, I'd say my mom suffered from that more. She was the one that would stay, and my dad and I would go and do things. I remember going to World Series games with my dad, and we would go, and my dad would always take me to go do stuff. And so my mom would be home with my brother. My dad is still the person that I call, because I'm very much more spontaneous, shoot from the hip, very impulsive, And I talk to my dad to be okay, let's talk through this. What's
Reel it in.
at least give me the opportunity to
Here's some logic.
Yeah. I'm also a big believer in intuition. So sometimes you just got to go with your gut,
Yeah, it's funny. It's knowledge is powerful, but so is imagination. And then where are you living today?
So now I live in Colorado. I live up in the mountains in Evergreen, 45 minutes west of Denver. Yeah, it's awesome. Still lets me have my country roots, but close to the city. Lots of things for the kids to do. Always spending time outside. I ski a lot, hike a lot, camp a lot. Yeah, just still try to stay active.
And you serve that active lifestyle with your business. Tell the listeners what your business is and what you guys do.
I have a company called Genesee Nutrition, and we make the best tasting, healthiest protein bars on the planet. Genesee is the first place where the continental divide opens up and you have the snow-capped peaks. And so it's the first place you really feel like you're in the mountains. So the idea behind it is Genesee is where your journey starts. That's where your adventure begins. Everything that we love to do, hiking, biking, skiing, camping, paddleboarding, kayaking, fill in the blank. There's so many awesome things to do in Colorado. That's where the adventure began.
And so you kind of fuel that adventure. It's funny too, because Genesee, it reminds me of Genesis, which is the beginning. That's great, man. And how many kids do you have?
We have 3 in our house. I'm in a blended family. So one of them is my blood. The other 2 are Courtney's from a previous relationship. Very awesome house. We've got 3 kids, all kindergarten, 1st grade, 4th grade, 5, 7, and 10 years old. Incredibly fun time. They're at that stage where they all have really unique and vibrant personalities. They're all very different. So even having to parent them all in different ways and approach them all in different ways, it can be complex, but it's also really fun. I love being a dad.
How old were you when you became a dad?
When my daughter was born, I was 25, living a completely different life then. It was not an on-purpose thing. I was living on the 25th floor of a high-rise downtown Denver, young and single, out partying, enjoying life, just living this, what I thought was the dream at the time. I definitely had to completely change my lifestyle, but it was absolutely the best thing that's ever happened to me. Totally grounded me back to earth in ways that I needed to be humbled, and in ways that I needed to be grounded that I wasn't.
And you really do have a fairly uncommon, I'll say, childhood too, in that, so yes, you have this disabled brother, but also your father, you found out at, I think you said age 12 or something, that your father was not your biological father. Will you tell the listeners about that? And then what it's been like to reconcile, whoa, this isn't my bio dad. And who's my bio dad? And do I need to know them? Is this like, what's all that like? Could you tell us a little bit about it?
So at 12, I found out that my dad that raised me, my dad, the awesome guy that is my dad, was not my biological father. And it was because with my brother being disabled, I'm sure if this happened now, like they'd have a better explanation for it or something. But my brother being 36 or 37 or something, whenever he was born, all they were able to tell my parents was that my parents have some sort of genetic thing where if they have kids, there's a high likelihood that their children will be disabled, which is why my brother was disabled. After several years, I'm 7 years younger than my brother, and after several tries, my parents had went to a sperm bank, and after several tries, my mom finally got pregnant. I'm what they would call a cryo baby or in vitro. So when I was 12, my parents told me this, and I remember like sitting on the bed. I can literally see it now. My parents, telling me this, and for the first few days, it was really tough. Like I really just kind of felt this sense of loss. I was really confused. I'm like, what do you mean my dad's not my dad? Like that was really confusing. Ultimately, it's given me this opportunity, and even being in a blended family now, it's like, what does it mean to raise children that aren't necessarily your own? Because they are yours. You are the dad in the house. You are the parent. They do look up to you. They love you. They need you. They appreciate you, even if they're being a little shit sometimes.
Totally.
But like deep down, they love you, appreciate you, and need you. All my mom and dad had was like a couple papers on this guy, like his hair color, his eye color, like where he graduated from college, his height, like certain things. Not a whole lot. He had filled out like a 1 or 2 page questionnaire. So I had like a little bit of inkling into like who he was and what he cared about. And I always kind of felt like I wanted to meet him. And I think I initially had hesitation because I didn't know if that would like upset my dad or if that would somehow like cross some sort of boundary. But I remember talking to him about it, and he's like, yeah, I completely understand like why you would want to meet this guy. So I like reached out to the cryo bank. I asked if there's a way to get in contact with them, and they were like, yeah, you can write a letter, we'll give it to him. I was like, can I send it's like we're in the digital age now. Can I make a video and can you pass this on to him? So I made like this 3 to 5 minute video, basically just telling him how awesome my life is, and I'm like, I guess you're going to see this. I don't know that I'll ever meet you, but I would like to meet you. But either way, I'm just incredibly grateful that you did what you did. I don't know why you did it, but I'm just super grateful because I have such an awesome life and I'm just blessed beyond measure. And so within a few days, I got a response. They're like, yeah, we're going to connect you. He said he'd love to meet. And so a couple months after that, Courtney, my partner, she and I flew out to California, got a camper van, and we were like, worst case scenario, we're just going to go camp by the beach and we're going to go meet this guy. And so this guy and his wife now, they got married into their 40s, and they didn't want kids. But come to find out, I have at least 7 donor siblings. You call them diblings.
Disciplines. Wow.
Diblings, yeah. And so he had met a couple of them. My sister actually came at the same time that I went. She had reached out and finally met him maybe 6 months before.
Whoa.
So it's all super fresh. Yeah. So there's 7 of us total that we know of so far. And we're all within 2 years of each other. So like my sister that I met is 4 months older than me. Ironically, her mom was also like redheaded Irish, like my mom. So we look so much alike.
What a trip. That is so crazy.
Also, the other things are crazy. So every single one of these 7, we all either have a 4-year, some of them even have up to PhDs, and it's all environmental science and all engineering. 4 of us are engineers.
That is insane.
This is an environmental scientist. Our sperm donor dad, our bio dad or whatever, he was a PhD environmental science graduate. It's crazy that obviously we didn't grow up together or anything, but we all ended up going into these scientific engineering fields. The other real interesting thing I'd say about it is when I met this guy, although I'd never known him ever, until I was 29. There was like this incredible familiarity.
Wow.
And even like after hanging out for a while, certain similar mannerisms, even similar ways of viewing the world in some ways, even like really similar demeanors. Like he was this very large but gentle man. You could tell he cared about the right things. He had a lot of love inside of him, but also very hardworking, cared about his business, you know? So, I mean, it was just really fun to like see those because it's kind of that nature versus nurture. I felt like I came to know myself way more through that. You know, not that I would ever had to meet him in order to self-actualize or know myself, but it definitely was like a step in my journey, my own personal growth of knowing who I am and understanding myself and accepting myself. You know, there were deep things of at 12, you're told that who you thought you were is not who you were. And then, you know, you kind of just go on with life because you're just doing what you got to do, even though some of those things weren't resolved. And then I met him, and a lot of that 12-year-old boy who had confusion around who I was healed.
You kind of closed the genetic loop. Wow. That is absolutely epic. All right, here I'm talking to Charles Clay. This was honestly an opportunity that was meant to be. Charles and I had incredible serendipity when it came to putting this thing together, and we have a lot in common. One of those unique things was struggling with anger and also fighting. We discussed numbing out and partying and hanging out with friends, doing basically whatever we could to not do the real work that we needed to do. We had an epic time just talking about some really deep and important work that we both had to go through on our spiritual journey. Charles is a bright and articulate guy who just has an incredible vibe around him. I thoroughly enjoyed getting together with him and having the opportunity to talk. I think you'll enjoy it too. One of the things I'm really excited to talk with you about, and a little backstory on this, is I listened to your Kyle Kingsbury episode, which is absolutely epic, and I really want to recommend that the listeners check that out. Episode 222, which is also very cool. Speaking of alignment. Yeah, so you got a lot of alignment going on,
Yeah,
really.
thank you.
That's really cool. And so when I listened to it, you talked about this inner peace process, and you talked about being someone who people were kind of drawn to fight, you know, and if there was someone at a party that was going to get into a fight, it was going to be you. And I just resonated with that so deeply. And so I definitely want to be able to get into that today. I want you to talk about that and everything. But before we do, why don't you just tell our listeners like a little short, you know, brief history. Who are you? What are you up to?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, I grew up in Washington State. So the Great Northwest. I graduated from Washington State University with my degree in kinesiology, and always had a love for the ocean. And so my older brother was always talking about like, man, when I grow up, I'm going to be a surfer in Cali, you know, and that was kind of his like dream. And I was like, man, I'm kind of over Washington. I'm ready for the beach life. And so I moved to San Diego, and here I am like living my brother's dream. I was like, what are you going to come move out here, man? I'm surfing every day and like living it up. Became a trainer there, health coach, and life was good. You know, I was really enjoying that chapter. And then, you know, there was a part of me, you know how the universe gives you like a little feather of like, hey, maybe you should make an adjustment here, shift some of this stuff that isn't working in your life. And I was like, nah, you know, I'm fine. And then it's like we get hit by a brick, right? It's kind of like a big wake up call of like, you know, a nasty hangover, and we have to deal with some consequences from some bad decisions. And so, you know, that happened. And then I was like, okay, I need to make some shifts to realign my life here, because I'm teaching health coaching and training, but I'm training like 10 clients a day, running off coffee, and going out on the weekends and indulging in sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? And so I was out of balance. And so once, you know, that brick, that like nasty hangover that was finally like a wake-up call for me, inspired me to make some changes and like commit to, okay, I'm gonna stay clean, and had like the New Year's resolution, like I'm gonna go all year without eating sugar, and all these epic like you know, aspirations. And And, a week in, I fall back into old habits,
Yep.
I get hit with some heavy emotions and I'm, eating sugar again and right back in the old path. Mm-hmm. And so this continued until I found myself in 2008 up snowboarding in Mammoth Mountain. And this day in particular was crazy. It was a full-on blizzard. Like there was snow coming in every which way. You couldn't even see, like 5 feet in front of you, see like a blur of a tree or something. And it was just total whiteout. They closed down the lifts because it was so dangerous up there. And so it was me and my 2 buddies were the only ones up on the mountain at the top after they closed down the lifts. And we're looking at each other like, this is crazy, but hey, just stay low and be ready for anything, right? And so we just charged and we're having fun, blasting through this mountain. And my friends were in front of me and everything was cool until all of a sudden I went off a jump that I didn't know was there. And I'm in midair, freaking out. I'm like, I don't know which way is up or down. I don't know where I'm gonna land. And I tensed up and smashed right on my back. And I remember it felt like this lightning bolt just hit me, like right in like SI, L5, like bam. All of a sudden it was like the most intense physical pain I'd experienced at that time. Like it was like 11 out of 10 scale. Wow. And I was yelling. I was trying to get my friends' attention. They'd already bombed down the mountain.
Right.
I grabbed my phone and my phone's dead. It was out of battery. And I'm like, there's nobody up here. I'm in the most pain I've ever experienced. I'm in deep crap right now. And so literally had to channel my inner Spartan warrior in that moment and just to like click off my board and sit on it to just ride down on my butt as far as I could. And then I'd keel over and like breathe into the pain. It was so intense. And then I finally made it down the mountain and I'm like dragging myself to the cabin. And then I had to go see all these doctors and they're showing me x-rays and MRIs of like how jacked up my spine is. And they're telling me that you are going to need multiple surgeries or you'll never move the same again. And I'm like, what? I love this body. Like that is the worst thing I could hear right now. And so even in a fight or flight response like that, I was able to access my intuition and say no. Like I'm not giving my power to these guys. I'm not going into surgery. I'm gonna see how I can heal this naturally. And so that began a deep initiation to self-healing. Some of the most powerful tools that I gained along my journey started with like, I could barely crawl to the bathroom. So I was in so much pain that I had to sit, literally, it was like the universe just said, hey, sit with all these emotions that you've been drinking away, smoking away, trying to run away towards pleasure, all the fears of everything I was hiding, the shame. Like I was in such bad shape I couldn't even get up, let alone go to work. And so all these like heavy emotions and anger and like finally just sat in a pool of my own tears and like surrendered to all of it. And I went to deeper depths of those emotions than I had before. And in that I found gold. Like in each one of them, I was like, wow, like why have I been so afraid to go here? Like I feel super clear on the other end, and it's like once we go into it and allow ourselves to feel it, then it too passes, right? It's not like we're holding on to these anymore. And so I felt really free after that. Even though I was still in pain, I was able to set a clear intention in a meditation saying like, I'm open to receiving all answers to healing this naturally. And during that meditation, a friend of mine I hadn't talked to in years sent me a text literally while I was meditating saying, hey, I heard your back's really messed up. Check out neurokinetic therapy, the work of David Weinstock. And I was like, what is this? This rabbit hole that connected so many dots for me in my background in kinesiology and like helped me understand how everything was all interconnected. The physiology, that I literally just started watching his stuff and got my first session with one of his top students in San Diego and was blown away by what happened. I walked in there and I was in so much pain. My hip was out to one side, my upper body's to the other side. I looked like Shakira stuck in a mid-hip dance move, like frozen like that. And that was representative.
That's great.
Yeah, I was a mess. And that was representative of how out of alignment I was with my purpose, how out of integrity I was with what I was teaching at that time. And so these were deep lessons for me, and the body knows, it's like I got on that table and she started testing different muscle groups. She tested my glutes, and my glutes weren't firing. Like, she would just pull up on my foot or tell me to push down and nothing was happening. And I was like, what do you mean my glutes aren't firing? I have huge glutes. Like, what's going on here? And she's like, yeah, all form, no function. She had a good sense of humor. And,
Right.
And she had me clench my jaw and then retested the glutes. And all of a sudden, they were strong momentarily. And I was like, whoa. My body had just showed us that the neurological block was in my jaw, right? And jaw, later to find out, often holds anger, resentment, revenge. Some of these emotions that get stuck there can be a neurological block to the message getting to the big guns to activate those muscles to help stabilize the spine and keep us in alignment, right? So we found a couple other compensation patterns like that, cleared them up. I got off the table and I was like, what? Like, I'm like 90% better.
Wow,
I felt
that is
way less
insane.
pain. Muscles were firing again that were offline since the incident, and I gave her a huge hug and I was like, this is my path.
Stay tuned, folks.
So in this next bit, I'm actually talking with Attila Horvath. Attila is the father of 3 of my friends. He's this incredible intellectual philosopher type that if you go to a social event and you wind up talking to him, you'll just spend at least an hour picking his mind and talking about life. We had an incredible time really philosophizing about what it means to be a dad, what our role is, and how to raise amazing kids. He laid out some epic wisdom. So I think you'll get a lot out of it, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as much as I did. I got to give you a little background on Attila. Attila is the father of some friends of mine. He actually is the father of multiple friends of mine, which is really neat. He has 4 kids, and 3 of which I'm pretty close friends with. I'm actually not close with your other daughter, but Amanda, Zach, and Emma I know pretty well. So what's great is that every time I go to an event and Attila's there, I can't help but find myself in a corner of the room talking to this guy for hours. Like, I love to philosophize with them, and I really respect his mind. And maybe the thing that I feel like I've always had this admiration for is his parenting. And the reason is because of the result. When I hang out with his children, I'm always blown away. I'm blown away by their minds, by their hearts, by their drive, what they're doing in the world, just the kind of people they are. They're so self-actualized, so alive, so vibrant. And I always think back like, man, what was their family like? Like, what was that, what was that experience like? So I have this deep admiration for you, Attila, as a father. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on to Dadly today, is I want to hear about their childhood. I want to hear about your perspective. I'd actually really also love to even dive in on your childhood. Love to hear, where did this stuff come from?
Parenting, as you know, is a roller coaster ride. Alvin Toffler said, the illiteracy of the 21st century is not to be able to not read or write. It's not being able to learn, unlearn, and relearn. I use that because parenting is unlearning. It's unlearning your past, to relearn it, to see how you could apply it through the trials and the errors of your ways, to see that there is a better way of doing things. And it's constantly relearning what you think you learn. And it's unending. It's
Right.
unending. So I can't take a lot of credit for a lot of things that you said. But they're my kids, so I have to be responsible for what they are and who they are, and I'll take that responsibility.
Yeah. Well, you should be very proud. I just want you to know that.
Well, I think most of the credit goes for their ability to assimilate their environment. I think that's a big thing. Of course, I was part of that environment. Their mother was part of their environment. One thing I have to give you a background. My kids were born in the United States, in Charlotte, North Carolina, the three you mentioned. And we moved to Hungary when they were 5, 3, and 2. Emma being 2, Amanda being 3, Zach being 5. So for 4 years, they went to school in Hungary. And the Hungarian education system is completely different. To the point where when the parents got together, each child was talked to directly in front of the parents on what their strengths and their weaknesses were.
Oh, wow.
I mean, to the point of he needs to have better attention on this, and he needs to do more work on math. He needs to, and then they gave him the accolades also of what they were good at. And the class that my son, for example, was in, the teacher taught for 2 years, first grade and second grade. They taught both of them. The standard deviation between the kids in that class, this teacher said, I've never seen anything like it. The standard deviation was so small that if you take the bell curve, the middle was about a hairline. There was no standard deviation between the kids. And the teacher says that those kids taught themselves. And she says, I've never seen anything like that. Now, that wasn't because my son was there. It was just happened to be in a group that was very highly motivated, came from good backgrounds, were self-confident, and they learned well. Mm-hmm. Well, that happened in Hungary. How do you reproduce that? So I want to say this. It's nice if I could give you a can, right, and you open up that can and it has all the solutions on how to bring up good kids. There's no such thing.
Right.
4 years in Hungary made a big difference. Zach was in 7th grade, 2 years after he got there, he was the MVP of his grade in the country.
Wow.
He was that good in soccer.
Wow.
That didn't have anything to do with me.
Well, it reminds me, I went and saw Wayne Dyer, and I was in Hawaii, and Wayne Dyer, there's a couple things parent-wise that he said that was really good. But one of the things that he said, and this is, you're reminding me of this lesson, is that he said, you know, we think our children belong to us.
They don't.
They belong with us, but not to us. They are of us, but they are not us.
They are a gift from God, and we get to appreciate them.
Yeah.
And that is another mindset completely, because to go ahead and have somebody assimilate what I just said,
right,
to look at that as a gift that was given to them, and they treasure the gift, and their responsibility is to nurture that gift through the child.
Right.
So another point we'll get to nurture to the child's gifts and the child's bent in such a way that that child can develop, because there are no obstacles as much as there's aid to help them to be the people or the person they need to be. Because every child is different. They come out of the same womb, they come out of the same environment. If you know Zach, you know Amanda, you know Emma,
they're vastly different.
Totally different.
They are.
Their temperaments are different.
Yes, they are.
Their fears and their aspirations are different. They function very much the same, but in very different ways. And how they got to those different places is completely unique. And as a parent, you scratch your head and you shake your head and you go, what did I have to do with this? The mistakes that we made as parents actually aided for them to be the people they are.
Wait, what?
The mistakes that we made as parents actually aided for them to be the people they are. The failure of us wasn't a failure in respect to how they became to be who they are. So parents don't have to beat themselves up and say, oh, I did this wrong. Right? That's part of the formula. Our mistakes, as well as their mistakes, made them into who they are. And you can't create that out of a can. You can't create that from a formula. You need to have confidence that you're going to do the best you can, and labeled with love. You're not doing it selfishly. You're not doing it to go ahead and make them into something you want, but you're loving them enough that they can go ahead and use that love you give them as a security, as a stepping stone, as a springboard into the unknown, and they have the confidence that they're loved. How do you do that? You got to know the child.
Right.
You got to know. You got to see the child's developing. You got to understand. Now, it sounds like, oh, I did that. No, I did not know that. I learned it along the way.
Right. No, and failure is part of the process.
It is.
You don't get success without failure.
Yeah, both as a parent and as a child, too. And the combination of the two.
Okay, so here I'm talking to Stephen Huntsman. This meeting was insane. We had some amazing synchronicity literally captured right on the podcast. I don't want to spoil it for you, so you'll have to listen to find out. But let me just tell you that Stephen is this beaming soul. His smile, his energy was infectious, and he happens to be the founder of a really great supplement called High Vibe Mushrooms. It was so cool to hear his story, to hear about his father, who was the head coach for the Olympics. I think it was the track and field division of the Olympics in the 1980s. Just an epic guy with a really, truly amazing story. I had a blast shooting this one.
Let's do this.
Will you tell us a little bit about who you are? Give us this brief history. Who are you? And tell us your background.
My dad was the head Olympic coach for the U.S. Olympic track and field team.
Wow.
And then in 1988, which was the most country-attended Olympics ever, because the 84 games were boycotted, the 80 games were boycotted by different countries, and so 88 was the first big Olympics in 3 Olympics.
Wow.
And so I was so blessed, so fortunate growing up, traveling the world with the world's greatest athletes, the world's greatest track and field athletes, which I believe is the true Olympic sport, and it's an ultimate, it's the man, it's the human, And so, running around the world growing up with Olympians and this father figure who was a father to all these other athletes that somewhat even growing up before the NCAA rules got a hold of us, coaches would have athletes stay in our home. So I grew up with athletes and Olympians staying in our home. And so just really fortunate traveling the world, going to Olympic and world athletic events. Wow. And just seeing these humans live and just, my God, just inspiring me to be the best I can be. And so growing up with an amazing sporting family, I was very fortunate. And then at 14, before the internet, I realized that I needed a little discipline, actually, and sports was really calling me. So before the internet, I went and got brochures and went to the library and researched boarding schools and military academies to attend. I was running with a crew that some of them aren't with us anymore, and went to my mom and dad one night when I was 14 years old and had a brochure of a military academy, one of the oldest ones in North America, and told them I found this academy and would like to go. And they were taken back, and we talked about it. My dad and I went to visit it, and it had, still to this day, has one of the number one sports programs in the country. And it was amazing. Still my best friends to this day. I went to military school and thought sports was going to be my life as an athlete. And the summer going into my senior year at military academy, I was in a car accident, and long story short, I was paralyzed from the waist down, was comaed out for a long time, and my dreams are like, man, I'm going pro. I'm like playing ball. I'm quarterback. I'm track. I'm doing that. So blink of an eye, that rod's in the back, and fortunately I'm walking in here.
Yeah,
and from that point, I started getting into theater and film production myself, and pursued a career in media and entertainment, and completed a complete filmmaking program out in California, and spent about 20 years out in Los Angeles working in the industry, and studied entertainment law and have a legal background, and got into just doing deals, and so putting together media deals and producing and events and festivals and just sharing amazing, cool content and events. And had always been into, like I mentioned, health and wellness, and partnered up with some epic leaders in longevity. And so my history is just led me to this point now where I am a health and wellness and media executive. I am very excited about a supplement company that myself and some friends have launched, and it's taking off and producing content and events and producing, helping produce this little baby, this little 2.5-year-old with my
This is not a
amazing
plug,
wife.
but what is the supplement? I really am interested. Like, what supplement?
Yeah, great. It's called High Vibe.
Yeah.
High Vibe mushrooms.
Yes.
And they're not psychotropic.
Right.
And it's a
Like
proprietary.
the adaptogens.
Adaptogens, yeah, the 10 super mushrooms.
Yeah.
And it's a 10 blend mushrooms, certified organic, non-GMO, every certification. They're grown in a government-inspected safe room. They're taken from the same tissues every time, working with a top mycologist. They're grown on organic oat strands, and we use the mycelium, which is the intelligence of the earth. And yeah, we're just
It's like
getting
the
these
largest communicating.
Absolutely.
organism
It's just
organ.
unbelievable what the mycelium, our RNA and DNA is 40% and 60% similar to that of a mushroom. And plants, guess how much of the percent?
How much?
5%.
No way.
Yeah, so we are a network, a mycelium nerve network in our
Wow.
body. Yeah, so
that is
it's-
like my
it's-
brain just went poof.
And
That's
that your brain is this
amazing.
network of electrical
So
synapses is going on.
I'm on those mushrooms. I don't know if I'm on your mushrooms, but I'm on the Limitless. They're 5. It's called Limitless.
Oh, ours is called High Vibe Mushrooms Limitless Sense 10.
Hold on a second.
Wait a
Let me
minute.
get my package.
Well, is it purple?
Hold on a second.
If you have ours, because we're only in one store.
I have to get.
I brought a bag too to show. No way.
This is not it.
Oh my gosh, where did you get that?
Are you kidding? Are you
Where did you
kidding
get
right
that?
Now? This
Where
is
did
like
you Where did you get
the
that?
craziest serendipity. I got this at Casa de Luz. I got this
At Third Eye Tonic.
at Third
there.
Eye Tonic. I literally
We
is,
can't plan this. We're using this.
This is the craziest serendipity. So this really is your mushroom
Dude.
stuff? This is what I've been using.
I'm
I
like freaking.
love this stuff.
Where's my phone? I got to take a. This is unbelievable.
Yes.
That's
When
the
you-
only. That's the first and only store because we've been doing this online. I'm freaking out.
I'm
This
literally-
happened to me
You're sitting there
last
saying,
week
like,
at an event that I'm totally freaking out. I got to get a picture.
dude.
Unbelievable.
It really is a
When you,
small world.
I go, it's purple, and you didn't answer. I go, oh, that's not it. It's something. And you pull, and I saw the bag.
Yeah, it's so good, and you know, I feel cleaner. I feel
Thank you.
I feel more clarity. I'm a fan of mushrooms, psychedelic, also on my pizza, all kinds of mushrooms. I love mushrooms. There's no question about that. I've had some really deeply spiritual, profound moments on mushrooms. Two solo quest that connected me with God in a really, really deep way. Helped me get more clear on who I am as a being. Helped me even one time understand that this idea of God and the devil as being like this one separate, or these two separate things that are outside of us, that was an illusion. Both of those things are in us, and that they are a part of us, and that they are not separate, you know, as we'd like to think of them as, you know. And, you know, I know everybody has their own view on life. For me, one of the amazing awareness pieces was that this experience, you know, the hell that we can live is here. The heaven that we can live is here. They're inside of us. They're all part of us. It's all here. It's all one, you know, and that happened on mushrooms. So I'm a big fan of mushrooms.
Wait a minute.
All right, we hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you've received some value from it, please share it with other dads and consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll see you in the next episode. Looking for support with your fatherhood journey? Go to BeDadly.com and take our Dadly Disposition quiz and learn helpful insights on how you can overcome power struggles with your kids.